Welcome to the 2021 holiday special episode of the Neighborhood Money Podcast, a video podcast here to help you grow your financial knowledge and build a life you deserve. And so it's actually the final episode of the Neighborhood Money Podcast for 2021. But Drew, we've got a pretty special episode here for our listeners.
Yeah, and you know, in your intro there, I think it got a little confusing because of the coincidence we have. So episode 20,
Right?
episode 22 is going to be the episode going into 2022. And then we had 21 episodes before this, and we're going to be wrapping them up into like a nice little package for everybody of showing the 2021 highlights. So it's kind of crazy with these numbers where it's like 22 and
Right,
episode
right.
22, and then it's like 21 episodes we're going to be recapping, and it's for 2021. It's kind of a funny coincidence.
Yeah, so this episode is going to be basically just a recap of the last 21 episodes that we've had, some of our top moments that we've identified. So hopefully you guys can have a lot of fun with us listening to what we've talked about over the last, what has it been, like 5-6 months or so?
It's pretty
But it's going to
crazy
be a whole
that
lot of fun.
it feels like it's only been a month of us actually getting onto this podcast. So
Yeah.
the fact that it's actually spanned across, 6 months or however long it's been is pretty crazy to me. I wouldn't have expected it. I wasn't really ever thinking about getting into a podcast super serious and being like consistent throughout it. It was something I've toyed around in the past of like I've talked about, side hustles or, passive income. But actually diving in with you after that text message saying, "Hey, I think I want to do a podcast," or like, "Let's just do it." And then the
Yeah.
fact that we're
Yep.
now 22 episodes in, and we've been doing it for almost like that, however months, you said 5 or 6 months. It's pretty amazing, pretty crazy to me. I didn't think I was going to be here. We've covered lots of information. All these episodes have been in that 30 to 50-minute range. So it's kind of nice to be able to go through little holiday specials. You can see with my little hat, that's actually my baby's.
Yep.
And some lights that don't light up anymore. If I click these things, they don't work at all. So, but we've covered a lot of information. So it's going to be fun to go back and recap some of the bigger points that we thought were good during this 2021 year, and just summarize to take some information into the new year.
But Drew, before we get there, hit us with some trivia.
We got two again this week, and the first trivia question is, on this date in 1981, and in his 38th game, this Oiler became the fastest NHLer to get to 100 points. For this question, I have a feeling I might know who it is, but we'll wait till the end. Second trivia question here is, the 2013 Taste of Diamonds is known for its astronomical pricing. The bottle label itself is even made out of white gold. How much does this bottle of champagne go for?
I mean, this bottle won't be served at my house in the new year, but very fitting for the new year coming up here.
So let's pop a bottle of champagne, pour yourself a glass, sit back and relax and watch some of the best moments we thought in the year 2021 for the Neighborhood Money Podcast. But the emergency funds have been very important to me, and it's just because you never know what's going to happen. I talked about earlier, if a hot water heater goes out or you need new tires, your month-to-month income and expenses can be fine, but they're just those outliers. So if you don't have anything saved up in your rainy day fund, it causes some trouble. And emergency fund, it doesn't have to be, you probably eventually want to get it close to 6 months of your expenses, but really to start off with, just put, $10, $20, have your first goal is $100 emergency fund. And then once you hit that goal, you move it up to $200. Once you hit that goal, just keep moving it up. And you'll be surprised by having that budget and putting some money off to the side, how fast that emergency fund can fill up.
With really anything personal finance related, like you got to start somewhere. So start small and build from there. But really to piggyback a little bit off what Drew was saying, ultimately your emergency fund, you do want to beef up. And when you think about your personal situation, the size of your emergency fund is really dependent on the stability of your career and your income that you get every month. So good rule of thumb is if you have a pretty stable job, you can have 3 to 6 months worth of an emergency fund, maybe even closer to the 3 rather than the 6. But if you are in a type of career where maybe you're working off of or living off of commissions, or you're working for yourself and your income fluctuates quite a bit month over month, you might want to think having an emergency fund from the 6 month and maybe all the way up to even 12 months. Granted, that's quite excessive. I personally don't think you should ever have more than a 9-month emergency fund. That's just because you can make your money work so much better elsewhere. But then, even outside of just the stability of your job, you got to think of what makes you comfortable and what makes you sleep better at night. If it's a 6-month emergency fund, if it's a 12-month emergency fund, great, just have that. Part of this journey is making sure that you are comfortable in your financial situation.
Yep. And it's one of those things when you personally thought you maybe don't need an emergency fund more than 9 months. And then the thing with that is it's beautiful because once you have that built up, it's there. So you already put money away, you already have it beefed up, and then that brings to the third point of this top 10 personal finance is limiting debt. So if you have all this extra cash now, you got this emergency fund, you can start tossing all that extra money into your debt. Start putting towards principal and just let all that extra cash snowball into that.
Then the natural next question, Drew, is how does someone get started with budgeting? And I think really it's how do you identify where you spend your money?
And I think that's, perfect way of saying is you got to identify and you got to focus and what is your reason for wanting to create this budget. Is it going to be you want to get out of the paycheck to paycheck lifestyle? You want to get outside of debt. You want to really understand where you're overspending each month. So I think that's really important just to identify your focus first when starting a budget.
I know looking into our family life, the budget really helped us pay a considerable amount of student loans and debt off in a relatively quick amount of time. And that's just because we were very cognizant of where we were spending our money, and we allocated that excess money towards our debt rather than spending it elsewhere. And there's definitely sacrifices that you have to make, yet the budget is such a key piece to building financial stability.
So then I think, once you kind of can identify what it is, your purpose for the budget, I think it's kind of that natural step of, okay, I know my focus. Now, where can I put pen to paper? And, something that you can look at is, maybe you give yourself 30 days to track every single of your expenses for a month and then start a budget. Or maybe you want to look at bank statements, or maybe you have like an app already that you're kind of tracking stuff and look back on that. So I think that's a good next step is once you figure out your focus, then it's where do you start looking at your numbers? And I think it's just you have to look back at prior history.
Drilling down, what are those reoccurring expenses that you have each and every month? So mortgage, rent, car insurance, even small things like Netflix, Hulu, and those types of things. Identifying what those reoccurring payments are or expenses. But then you also have to account for like things like food that might be more variable, or big things that might happen in any given month. And so that's why, looking back 30 or even like 60 days, the last couple of months, and trying to get like a general sense of where you have been spending your money is a really good place to start.
Yep. And, looking back historically, something that you do want to keep in mind as well is when are your property taxes due? When's your car registration due? And those are things that you can look at and find a way to average those out through the month on a month-to-month basis.
So the first one that we wanted to dive into is your 401k.
So this 401k, there's two ways of looking at it. You have your 401k, your traditional, and then you have your 401k Roth. And the biggest thing you have to think about when you're looking at it is your traditional 401k is saying there's more money that you put into it now if it's on a percentage basis, but then you get taxed when you take it out at retirement. And the Roth side of it, tax deferred or the pre-tax is what they're calling it. And then the Roth side is saying, kind of getting the tax out now, but when I retire, whatever I made comes out tax-free.
Yeah, and that is the best thing about the Roth, in my opinion, is whatever that account balance is when you hit that retirement age, that's all yours. The IRS can come and take any of that.
And I think when you're looking at doing a 401k, try using a fixed number when you're doing your investing, because if you're going off of a percentage, it's going to be a different amount for your traditional versus Roth.
Yeah, and I think a really big thing to think about is if you bump up your Roth contribution to be the same as a traditional contribution at the end of your working career when you're about to retire, that number is going to be the same in each account. However, in the traditional, you still have to pay taxes on that. And so say at the end of your working career, you have $1 million in each. Well, your Roth, you have $1 million, but your traditional is probably going to be more like 700,000 after you start taking money out, because you still have to pay taxes. And that's why, Drew, you said that be more aware of the amount that you're investing, not just the percent that you're putting in. So what exactly is an individual retirement account? So at its really most basic level, it's like we said, it's an account that you are going to invest in for retirement outside of your employer. And the first IRA, or individual retirement account, is going to be your traditional IRA.
And with this traditional IRA, and with it saying individual retirement account, one thing that's different between this and your other just trading stocks is, remember, this is also a tax advantaged plan. With this traditional IRA, the individual retirement account, the one thing you just want to remember is that it's going to be tax deferred. So the taxes aren't really coming out now, but then later in the future when you withdraw, the taxes will be coming out.
So Drew, what's a good example for our listener here?
I would probably say if, for example, you had, let's say your paycheck was $1,000 and let's say your taxable rate was 20%. So from your $1,000 paycheck, taking the 20% tax rate, you're going to have to pay $200 of tax.
Yep.
And now for this example B, this would be if you're using your tax advantaged traditional individual retirement account. Let's take that same $1,000. And what we want to do is, since it's pre-tax or tax deferred, we want to make a contribution before the tax comes out. So let's say $100 you want to contribute towards your traditional IRA. So now you have your $1,000 paycheck minus your $100 contribution. You have your $900. Now that $900 is what's getting taxed at your 20%. So now you're paying $180 in. So you're going to see between example A with $200 you have to pay tax, example B with $180 tax, there's a $20 difference. And this is an extra $20 that's going to be growing tax deferred, which means more money in your account now, but then taxes will be taken out when you withdraw.
So when you think about your traditional account, at the end of the day, what it does is it lowers your taxable income by the amount you contribute to the account. And then that money will grow tax deferred. And by tax deferred means that you will be taxed on that money once you start withdrawing from this account in retirement.
Correct.
And so one big rule for individual retirement accounts is that you can only contribute earned income that you make. And there's some rules around what is earned income, but you can only contribute up to 100% of your earned income, up to some limits. Drew, what are some general rule of thumbs that we can really start with and really adapt to any individual situation?
As we walk into this, the first part is just generally talking. This is you walking into dealership. So why am I getting the vehicle? What's the vehicle for? How much depreciation is coming off of it? And then you can think to yourself, all right, how much can I afford? And I think that's what a lot of people initially just go to right away is, what can I afford? And a good benchmark from what I've seen is there's a rule, it's called the 24 and 10. So that means you want to be able to have enough money to put 20% down on.
Yep.
You don't want to do more than 4-year loan, and it's no more than 10% of your take home pay.
And I really like to take this 24-10 rule. I really like to increase that 20%. So the amount you're putting down, I'm actually a big fan of paying cash for a car if you can, especially if you're going to finance and not invest the difference. I think paying cash and not having that loan on you is a huge benefit to your financial position. But I do recognize that, financing can have its advantages. And so I like to see that 4-year term down to 3. Personally, I don't like having a loan out on a depreciating asset any more than 3 years, but I think that 10% of your take home pay is a really good rule of thumb, because it really drills down into how much can I actually afford in a vehicle.
And when you're talking about you like paying cash for vehicles, the car dealerships are in it for the financing,
Right.
interest, and add-ons. So that's their type of the game. So if you are fortunate enough that you are paying cash for the vehicles, make sure you can still go in there and play the game with them. So
Yes,
if you're
definitely.
going out and saying, hey, I don't know if I'm going to pay cash, I don't know if I'm going to put this amount down, then they can work with you and get you better offer, because they're thinking, okay, I'll cut them down another $1,000 here, but
Right.
I'll make it back on interest. Little do
Hmm.
they know you're paying cash. If you're just
Yep.
saying cash right away, they're not going to work with you because they know they can't make any more money off of you.
Right.
So make sure you are playing your cards right. And what's the phrase? Playing them under the table or whatever it may be. Just don't. You're not showing all your cards. I don't know
Yeah,
what the phrase is.
but I think that's a really good point, Drew. I mean, yeah, you definitely want to go into the dealership knowing what your options are on how you can get the
Mm-hmm.
best deal. And even if you are a cash person, you
Yep.
might still, if you finance, be able to get a cheaper car. And you know what
Yep.
you can do the next day, or the next month, or the 2 months later? You can
Yep.
pay off that loan.
As long as it doesn't have a clause saying no early payment. So make sure you check
Yep.
that out too.
That is a good point. Most likely they won't have that clause. I don't
Yep.
think they really include that a whole lot anymore,
No,
but
not too much.
financing is where they make the money. So if you can get a few grand off by
Yep.
financing, and then you come back in a couple of months and pay it off in cash because you don't want that liability on your personal balance sheet, I think that's a
Yep.
really good option. And it's actually a really good way for you to have buying power when you head into those dealerships.
Yep. And that would be, at least if this is what you're alluding towards, is the utilization of this
Right.
credit card. And a way to think about this is, say your max was $1,000 on your credit card limit and you have a balance of $300. That's giving you that 30% utilization mark. And the
Mm-hmm.
higher that utilization means the closer you are to the max of your credit limit. And then that just start looking more poor on your credit score.
Yep, the utilization rate, you really want to keep that low. And so when you do have those high balances, that's going to decrease your credit score. One myth to really avoid is you don't really want to have a rolling balance on your credit card. You do hear from time to time that it's important to have a balance on your credit card because it does improve your credit score. That's actually not true. Having a balance on your credit card is ultimately going to lead to higher interest rate charges as well as higher utilization rates, which could negatively impact your credit score.
That's all a very good point with those utilization rates. And if you're thinking about somebody that has a really good credit score rating, this is something where they may have that 7 to 10% utilization rate is kind of where people like to put it towards.
Mm-hmm.
And this utilization rate, it's at the statement balance date. Like when your
Right.
statement ends, that's where it happens. So if you're paying all this money off before your statement comes out, your utilization will be lower. If you're paying out at the statement date, that's what's going to be sent off and showing what your final amount is.
I think it's a really important point to make is that even beyond your credit card balances that you have to also account into other debts that you may have, because all of that, when you think about your credit score, is going to impact what your score is from these credit score companies. And the first category of side hustles are freelancing. And there's really, the first one is through whether it's Fiverr, Upwork, or Slogan Slingers. Those are all three different websites.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the one, Drew, that I really want to focus on that gets a lot of attention is Fiverr.
Yeah, Fiverr is an awesome app. I've looked on it multiple times. I've never actually used it to gain money, but I have used it for, if I wanted to find out a slogan or if I needed somebody to potentially, make an app. And there's endless things they can do on there. I think when we were talking the other day, I was speaking with you, they even have areas, if you're really good at Excel, you
Right.
could just clean up people's data for you, or you could clean up their data and they pay you to do that.
Yeah, there's really, possibilities are endless there. It's kind of just you put out your skill set
Yeah.
and someone hires you based on that skill set. I was actually, in preparing for this episode, Drew, we haven't talked about this yet, but I was watching a video on Fiverr, and there's a guy out there that all he does is gets hired to send a video saying happy birthday to someone. And he charges $50 a video for, I don't know, like a 10-second clip.
just to
But
say happy birthday, Cavan Sackpool.
yeah, it's crazy. So, Fiverr, you can ultimately really do anything that you have a skill set for. Excel, like Drew was saying, wishing someone
Mhm.
happy birthday,
Yep.
really ultimately whatever you want. And people actually can make decent money off of this on their side, on the side of their full-time job.
Yeah, and the exciting thing with Fiverr and Upwork, for lack of better terms, is like the same one of the same things. It's just a Fiverr competitor.
Hmm.
But these two different sites, I mean, you can have your gig that you want to do, your little freelance job, but it extrapolates you to entire nation and the world. So it doesn't just put you just to your city, it puts you to the whole entire world, which is
Hmm.
pretty crazy. Well, it's not my number one, but it's my last one. Like I said, no specific order.
Right.
But this one isn't on the monetary side of it for money mistakes. This is on the education side of it. I wish I would have taken an active role in my financial education as soon as possible. I wish I would have done it in high school. I wish I could have done it more in college. And there was times where I thought I had that financial mindset or that entrepreneurial spirit, but really not until the last 3 or so years, I really took a big vested interest in reading books, watching
Hmm.
YouTube videos, seeing something that I've never heard about before. I know I probably would say the book that got me really thinking about it was that Rich Dad Poor Dad by that Robert Kiyosaki.
Hmm.
And
Great book.
it, it really changed the way my mind thought about money. And as I started looking into other streams of income, you start seeing very creative ways that people have made money. And it really just helps broaden your knowledge and have the ability to make a calculated risk on something you might not have known before.
I think that book lays out really well around buying assets versus liabilities. And I think in the society that we live in, we're really taught, or at least shown, to buy liabilities. So you buy the
Hmm.
car, you buy the nice house, you buy the
Yeah.
nice clothes. Whereas Robert Kiyosaki really teaches buy those assets that are going to make money to then buy those liabilities. And I think once you
Yeah.
have that mindset switch, I also read that book and it was an eye opener for me as well. Once you have that mindset switch, now you're looking for, okay, well, how do I buy assets that are going to give me money that I can
Hmm.
then use to buy other things?
I mean, I know we were talking last night a little bit as well, and just talking in the crypto world in general. I might have heard about Bitcoin in high school or college, but it would have been just very fast and in passing.
Hmm.
And that could be one where if I would have really taken an active role in my financial education and financial literacy, it could have been just a very calculated risk or tossing $100 at it and saying, if I lose it, I lose it. But it
Right.
could be, I like the technology, I like where it's going. There's a good possibility from the other information from the other financial information you bring in your head, you can see all the different ways it could be profitable or make money or really change the world. And that's just one of those things where, in my opinion, the more you know, the more you don't know, but it gives you it gives you a place to start and really start figuring it out.
And even if you're not interested in crypto or you're not interested in individual stock trading, still
Hmm.
increasing your financial literacy is
Hmm.
going to be extremely beneficial for you. And if you put it off, it's going to be extremely costly for you, again, because of compound interest and just investing your money and getting that compounding over the long term. And I agree with you, Drew, that it's not on my list, but it
Hmm.
is something that I wish I could have gone back when I was 16, 17, 18, and
Yeah.
really just started having that passion for personal finance. I'd be significantly more ahead than I am now. Granted, I've,
Yeah.
I and my family have been very fortunate in our career paths and whatnot, and we're sitting in a really good place. But just think of how far or how much further we would be down the financial independence path.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But one thing that we can do when we think about buying
Hmm.
versus renting is we can use what they call the 5% rule to get a general idea of which one makes more sense mathematically, or in other words, how can I figure out an equivalent mortgage payment versus a rental payment?
So, Cav, what you're talking about this 5% rule? What is the breakup of this 5%?
Again, it's a very simplified calculation, but
Mm-hmm.
what it does is it compares what they call unrecoverable costs. And so when we think about the rental side, your unrecoverable cost, in other words, money that you pay that you won't receive back on the
Mm-hmm.
rental side is your rent. You're not getting that back. The landlord is taking that and it's theirs.
Yep.
On the buying side, there's really three main categories to look at what those unrecoverable costs are. And this is what makes up the 5%. So, those unrecoverable costs, the first one are your property taxes. So, when
Mm-hmm.
you pay your monthly mortgage, you're going to pay a property tax.
Yep.
And that's hard to assess. And obviously, you'd have to look at your individual situation. But generally speaking, property taxes cost about 1% of the home value. So that's 1% out of the five.
Okay.
The second bucket here is accounting for maintenance expenses or just those different expenses that come with owning a home. So, like we talked earlier, whether it's a new roof, whether it's a new pipe, or whatever it might be, you have
Mm-hmm.
to account for that in this calculation. And so, in order to do that, again, it's challenging, but they have a rule of thumb that says, okay, 1% of your home value will
Mm-hmm.
be attributed to those maintenance expenses. And then the third bucket here, it's accounting for cost of capital. And so, when we think about cost of capital, ultimately what that's saying is what is the cost of your money putting it into a certain type of asset or investment. And so when we think about buying a house, there's really two buckets here. There's your cost of debt,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to be the finance part of your mortgage. So the interest that you're paying on that loan.
Okay.
That on average right now is about 3%, give or take the current environment. Then on the flip side, so that makes up 80% of the house value, the
Mm-hmm.
amount you finance. The 20% is the amount of your down payment. And this is cost of equity. And so this one looks at you put down your down payment. Well, that's money that you could not invest in a different place, or there's an opportunity cost to that money.
Yep.
And so if we think about, okay, well, what are other things that we could invest into? If you look at the stock market return over time, adjusting for inflation is about 6.5%, give or take, right? Whereas the housing market has returned, or house appreciation has returned roughly 3%.
And this is
And
about
I know
consistent with inflation.
Right. And I know this is a lot of numbers, so bear with me here, and we'll get to how you can actually apply this. But we really want to
Yep.
break down what this is so you have a better understanding of how you can use this 5% rule. So we have the 6.5% you could have invested into the stock market versus the 3% that your down payment went into your house appreciation. Averages again. That is roughly 3.5%. So if we round down to a more conservative assumption, that gets us to 3%. So cost of debt or your interest is about 3%. And then your cost of equity is about 3%. And that makes up the total amount of your house value. So that's the third bucket. That's 3%, making up the 5% rule.
With this 5% rule, the nice thing is we have gone and found out what the 5% is made out of. And the best part of it is we can even show you how to apply this in a simple way. You don't have to worry about what actually goes into this 5%. We wanted to detail that for you. But the easiest way to do this is I think we should go through just a quick example. And let's say the value of your house or the mortgage that you're looking for is $200,000. We are going to times that by 5%, the 5% rule. That's going to give us about $10,000. We're going to take that $10,000, we're going to divide that by 12, and that's going to give us about $833 and some change. And that will be your benchmark. So if your rent is actually less than that $833, you're thinking your rental situation is pretty good. If you're
Right.
above that, sticking with that house or buying that house is probably the better option in that type of scenario.
All right, so Drew, let's talk through some of these accounts that our neighbors here can use to help save and invest for their future college education expenses. The first one that comes to mind is kind of bucketed into the education specific category. And the first one is the good old fashioned 529 plan.
Yeah, the 529 plan is probably one that most people have heard about if they've actually done any type of research or had conversations about saving for their kids' education. One of the biggest things to think about with this 529 plan is you can consider it as pretty similar to your 401k or your IRA, but educational specific.
And even beyond that, it's Roth specific. So you have actual after tax contributions that go into the plan.
Yeah.
And then those contributions, when invested into your investment of choice, will actually grow tax free, giving you that tax benefit when you start to draw that money out for those qualified education expenses.
So when you're seeing that amount of money when your kid's 18, that's the amount of money that can actually go towards your college. You don't have to worry about tax consequences by withdrawing it.
And that really brings us to the next strategy, one that I get pretty fired up about. And it's really thinking about your HSA as a bonus retirement account, or in other words, the fund and hold strategy. There's some, nuances to it, but it's super powerful.
I have to say that I have not heard about this strategy before. And since we've been going through it and getting prepped for this episode, it has been on my mind quite a bit of how cool of a strategy I personally believe it is.
First thing I want to call out before we dive into the fund and hold strategy is, did you know that on average for a 65-year-old couple, they're going to spend almost $400,000 in medical expenses from 65 or for the rest of their life, essentially.
Whoa.
This strategy not only helps you build wealth, but it also can help you cover those medical expenses down the line. Two big points that need to be made up front too is that this does require you to have some extra cash flow in your budget. And then you also will have to be very detailed in this process around your documentation. Here's exactly what this strategy is. So like we were talking about with your typical healthcare strategy, you fund your HSA, and then when you have medical expenses, you pull from that to pay for those. And that's where you get two of the three tax breaks. Well, in this strategy, you fund your HSA each and every year, max out your HSA. And when those medical expenses come up, you don't pull from your HSA, but you pay out of pocket.
So it's not coming from your HSA account, it's actually coming from your bank account that you pay a majority of your bills with.
Absolutely. So you're paying with post-tax dollars for these medical expenses. HSAs allow you to invest the funds into, say, the stock market. Not only are these pre-tax contributions going in, now you're invested very similar to like a 401k, and you're going to let this money grow.
Yeah, so you can invest into limited investment vehicles through this HSA.
Where the real power comes in is if you can fund these medical expenses on an annual basis out of pocket and build up this HSA, that's going to grow to be pretty sizable down the line. And here's one more thing you need to know is that not only is this HSA account growing, but when you are paying these medical expenses on a year-by-year basis, as long as you keep detailed documentation of each medical expense, all of these expenses, as long as they happened after you set up the HSA account, are refundable from your HSA.
There's no expiration date on these bills is what you're saying. So it could be 20, 30, 40 years down the road. If you have these receipts, they can be refunded.
Take 10 years down the line, you fund your HSA, you let it grow in the market, and then you have this detailed documentation. And so at year 10, you can say, hey, I'm going to pay myself out of my HSA for all of these medical expenses. That's where you get the triple tax advantage. You get the pre-tax contributions, you got that tax deferred growth. And now that you're pulling for qualified medical expenses, you get tax-free withdrawals.
As a big lump sum or just as you send in your receipts, right?
But yeah, as you want to pull out any of those qualified expenses, you can pull that money directly from your HSA.
And what happens if you have an excess of money in this HSA plan after you've already pulled out your qualified medical expenses.
Well, Drew, that's where it's really cool. So let's just say for some round
Mhm.
numbers, your HSA grows to, let's say, $100,000 after 15 years. And let's just say over the course of that time, you had $75,000 of medical
Okay.
expenses. Well, now you have $25,000 of or of excess money in your HSA after pulling
Yep.
out. That just sits there and can continue to grow over time. When you get to 65 years
Mhm.
old, you can actually use this now as a retirement account, very similar to a traditional 401k. Pre-tax
Yep.
contributions grow tax free. And then once you hit 65, you can pull that money out without penalty. You will have to pay income
Yep.
taxes, but you did get those tax benefits.
And that's pretty amazing that this strategy, when you're looking at it long term, is getting these distributions later on in life tax free, which are huge, and anything excess that's still growing at the market rate can be taken out as same as it was a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA, and you just pay
Mhm.
taxes on it. So you can just keep those withdrawals small, or you talk with your financial advisor, and you can really make this work for you as a investment vehicle, not only a savings account for medical expenses.
And one more thing that makes this really powerful too. I know I mentioned how an average 65-year-old couple will have 390,000, almost $400,000 in medical expenses for the remainder of their life. You can use this HSA for those medical expenses and you'll get those tax-free withdrawals. So what you're essentially doing is through your HSA, you are funding or setting aside a portion of your retirement funds towards future medical expenses, taking advantage of that triple tax advantage.
Pretty amazing strategy, if you ask me.
So UGMAs and UTMAs, people probably are very familiar with the acronyms, but they might not actually have a clue of what they are or how to actually get started with them. So Drew, I think the first step really is to say, well, what does an UGMA and UTMA stand for? So they're two different custodial accounts where your UGMA is your Uniform Gift to Minors Act and your UTMA is your Uniform Transfer to Minors Act. And while they're very similar in their nature, they are slightly different in the type of investments that you can have within them.
With the UGMA account, it's a lot more on the, I would say, on the investing side. So your normal stocks, bonds, mutual funds, etc. They try not to do as much of the riskier investments. So when you've heard us talk about in previous episodes with investing on margin, you wouldn't be able to do that in these type of accounts. And the big difference with the UGMA and UTMA is the assets inside of it. So with the UTMA, you can actually transfer tangible assets. So say such things as fine arts or real estate.
So those are within the accounts, but who are these accounts actually for, Drew?
These accounts are for minors. So it depends on state, but most of the time you're looking at 18 and younger. And a lot of the times you're trying to think of what's a good way to give a gift to a minor that can kind of keep giving. And we've talked about, these custodial Roth IRA accounts, but you need to have earned income to fund these. So these UGMA and UPMA accounts are kind of nice because they're a way of giving your minor a head start on investing and still being able to gift them money, but it's more, you get more out of it than you would say a savings account, which is less than a 1% return per year.
And in addition to that, minors actually in the United States can't own stocks. So, in order for them to get access to, say, the stock market, they have to have a custodial account like an UGMA, where an adult actually oversees or is the custodian of this account. And so, being the custodian what means ultimately that you oversee the account, you control the money, you can control the type of investments the money is put into. But the actual money itself, once it enters into the UGMA or the UTMA, it is no longer the adults or whoever gave that gift. It is actually owned by the minor. They just don't have access to it until they become of age, of majority
hmm
in whatever state that you are currently in.
With all that said, if we were to wrap your story up and my story up and, really shorten it up, what are some areas that you, or what would you take out of this conversation from where you've seen your story begin and to the present?
Yeah, I think it's okay to switch up the direction that you're heading with your financial life. If you look at
hmm
where we were heading, we were in massive amount of debt, manageable for the income we had, but we had different sites, and we completely switched the script because it was important for us to get out of debt. And so I don't think, I think that you should look at your financial situation. And if it's not headed in the direction that you want it to, change it. Like, it's okay to take a step back, have some self-reflection, self-awareness, and say, whoa, let's slow this train down and let's
Yep.
maybe switch directions a little bit and really get on a path so that we can, or you can, hit your financial goals, whatever that might be. And they could be completely different than what Drew and I had. Obviously, I'm very well aware that paying off that much debt is going to cost us a lot down the line. Like, I fully understand,
Yeah.
but psychologically, it was important for our family to get out of debt because, one, it took a lot of weight off of our shoulders, and two, it allowed us to live more freely, post debt. So I would just say, make sure that whatever direction your financial life is headed, it's actually what you guys want. And if not, it's okay to, switch it up and change directions.
Yeah, if I were to add anything to that, and just kind of what I've kind of seen myself go through, is really try to find some type of a passion for something in your life, because it's going to really, I think, make your life better, whether it be financially or just mentally. And it's crazy when you do find some passionate about something, or when you're passionate about something, you find that it's not a chore to do, or it's not work to do. You'll get back from, say, your 9 to 5, and you'll be up till 1 in the morning just researching things because you really enjoy it. So I think just find passion about something is, I think, really important. And then the other thing is really try to focus on what it is you're doing. So if you're working that 9 to 5, really don't think about your side hustle. Really just focus on that 9 to 5, put 100% of your energy into what you're doing at that certain point. And then you have, a bunch of hours after you get done with work that, you might be a little bit tired, but you're going to find that what you're working on is enjoyable, and you're not going to be tired. And you just want to put 100% of your focus into that side hustle at that time. The moment you start trying to multitask and adding too many things to your plate, you'll see that it just gets a little too stressful, and you just
Yeah.
don't put in the work that you're capable of doing.
One of the most important modules is money mindfulness, what you were just talking about. What people don't understand, every one of them have $200 to $500 a month that could be going into their financial freedom plan, and they don't even know it. And this is how that works. We have a habit of just doing things, and we don't think of how much it adds up to. And here's a perfect example. Starbucks, one of the most successful companies on the planet today. College students, almost all of them, they go to Starbucks 4 or 5 times a week on their way to school. They're spending $5 every time. So let's say they're going 4 times a week. They're not thinking, I'm spending $5 each time. That's $100 a month. So what I'm challenging them now is, I'm saying, look, this is what I want you to do. I don't want to take away your Starbucks because I know you love it. But what I want you to do, instead of going 4 times a week, I want you to go twice a week. So instead of giving Starbucks $100 a month, you're only going to give them $50. And then we're going to set that other $50 to automatically come out of your checkbook, go into your financial freedom plan, and invest in index funds that earn 10%. In 30 years, it'll be worth $113,000. That $50 a month that you were given to Starbucks. Another big one is the car.
Yep.
I've had so many people go through my class that have $500, $600, $700, $800 a month car payments. Why? Because they can't. I can afford it. So I'm going to give you an example of a person who has a $650 car payment. What I want you to do is sell that car. I don't care how much you like it, sell it. I want you to buy another car for $325 a month. Instead of giving $650 a month to the bank, I want you to give them $325 to pay for that new car. And I want to take this other $325 and I want to set it up so it automatically goes into your financial freedom plan. In 30 years, you'll have over $700,000 with that $325. You add that to Starbucks, I just found you like $820,000 that you will have 30 years.
So those were some of our main highlights from the Neighborhood Money podcast thus far, and we've covered a lot of different topics. We've had Howard, a guest on our show, and so hopefully through all of the different episodes that we've had so far, you guys, the listener, have taken a lot out of it, and hopefully, moving into 2022, we can continue to bring you more information and more value through this podcast to help you grow your financial knowledge and truly build that life that you do deserve. But Drew, looking back over the course of the last few months, over the last 21 episodes, what is some of the biggest takeaways that you've had in starting up this podcast?
Yeah, as far as the podcast side of it goes, I've never done this much social media in my life. I've always been somebody that, has like a Facebook and maybe had an Instagram that somebody set up for me, and I would just kind of scroll and randomly pick up just current events from it. I would never
you and me both
post. I think if you go on my personal Instagram page right now, I actually have 0 posts from there for pictures of myself. Every picture on there is I've been tagged in.
Nice. So hey, I've got you beat. I've got 6 out there for Instagram on my personal account.
Oh, geez. So going from that to being on a podcast where our voices are being recorded and put out, to being on a video podcast where you can actually see our faces and it's put out there and stuck out pretty much in the internet unless we decide to delete it. And then really starting to utilize, I downloaded TikTok for this podcast. We did Instagram, we have a Twitter, we have a YouTube. We just tried going into LinkedIn and Rumble. So we're really spanning across a lot of these social media platforms and just getting used to them and seeing how to figure them out and how to work with them. It's been fun. It's been engaging, and I'm hoping to constantly improve on that so the content's better and then there's just more information out there for the listeners.
I think looking back, Drew, to getting to this point was an uphill battle for sure. There was, early on, there was a lot of things we had to figure out. How the heck we were going to podcast together through video, living 200 miles apart. Had to figure out how our internet bandwidth capabilities would actually support us to do this. What softwares and what tools do we have to use? And so there is a huge learning curve for both of us. And then on top of that, like you said, social media was so foreign to both of us. And, trying to jump on that and just basically trial by fire, right? And just trying to figure out what's working and how can we provide the most value for our listeners through those different mediums. I think that was a huge takeaway for me as well. Podcasting is no joke. There's a whole lot of work, especially when you're doing a video podcast, the editing and the planning and all of that stuff. Behind the scenes is a lot of work, but I gotta be really honest, it's pretty fun and it's a pretty cool endeavor that we're diving into here, and really looking forward to what 2022 and beyond brings for the Neighborhood Money podcast and our listeners and our community that we're building here.
Yeah, and you're talking about some of those hurdles that we jumped to figure out how we were gonna actually put on a podcast with you being far away from myself. And on top of just the podcasting hurdles, it was you having another kid, so you having 2 kids running around.
True.
There's a little bit of the pandemic going on, so it's if you're working from home or if your spouse is working from home or you're actually having to go somewhere, there's I was going through a kitchen remodel. I changed my background to where my office would be in the house. I've changed that around, I think 3 or 4 times since we started this podcast. I had a kid during that time. So it's been quite, even on the personal side, where this isn't necessarily our full-time job and we're not taking our whole beginning of our day into the podcast. So being able to find the time and balance that between work during the day, the podcast, and being with the family as well, because I'm sure there's sometimes where my wife gets a little irritated with me when I come down and do stuff on the podcast, or she goes, I haven't seen you all day, and then you're going to go back down on the podcast stuff. So, it's all those little challenges, and, hopefully you continue this consistency of this, and hopefully it all works out in the end, and then our wives won't be mad that we were down here working on a podcast.
I forget what Jordan said one time, but it was along the lines of that this podcast better make us rich and famous or something like that when we were at the early stages of planning. And I remember sitting at your house doing it, and I just got like the biggest kick out of it.
Yeah, I think I remember that too. But we'll see where this podcast takes us. I know we have some plans for the upcoming year. I know with Howard being the first interview we've had, that was extremely exciting for us. And moving forward, we're reaching out to more entrepreneurs or just people in general that have been retired or having their plan for retirement. And I think that's going to be a very fun segment of our podcast going forward, is being able to have more interviews, hearing people's stories, and really having a connection with money.
And we've also been listening to, for people reaching out to us, whether it's getting an episode on crypto or on actually trading and things like that. So all of that's in the works. And, in addition to that, let us know what are some of the stuff that you guys want to listen to. If you're over on YouTube, let us know in the comments down below. We would love to hear from you. We'll talk about really anything under the sun when it comes to personal finance, whatever it might be, money management, investing, etc. So let us know. We really want to put out the content that best fits you and best serves you and gives you the most value on a weekly basis. So whether that's over on YouTube, or if you want to give us a shout out over on Instagram, DM us, or whatever it is, we're open to anything and looking forward to hearing from all of you.
Absolutely. And with all that being said too, if you are watching this video podcast, a subscribe and a like would be awesome. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify, a review would be awesome. We really would love to hear from you guys to help this podcast be better. I know some of the other things in the works that we've been talking about is maybe, being kind of that investment encyclopedia in a video format, so it can be very quick hitting with information. So we know people can sometimes like hearing the long drawn out answers and other ways of certain investment ideas, but there's also, I'm sure a market of people that want to have just information quick. They want to have 5-10 minutes just to get the information, and we're hoping that we can be part of that as well.
Needless to say, we've got a lot in store for 2022. Drew and I were talking, we think we're a little ambitious with it, but we'll see if it all comes to fruition. Pretty excited to see where it goes. But Drew, before we get into what's going on in your neighborhood, let's get some trivia answers.
Woo! All right. So the first question that we had was, on this date in 1981 and in his 38th game, the Oiler became the fastest NHLer to get to 100 points. So, who is this NHLer that got to 100 points?
It is the great Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where my mind was thinking, because I don't know too much about hockey, but I think everybody knows Wayne Gretzky. So It was, even if I didn't even hear the question and I knew it was about hockey and some trivia, I think maybe it's Wayne Gretzky. And now for our second question. The 2013 Taste of Diamonds is known for its astronomical pricing. The bottle label itself is even made out of white gold. How much does this bottle of champagne go for?
It goes for over $2 million. So that better be the best popping bottle of champagne that you'll ever have in your entire life.
Seriously, I'm not a big champagne guy, even though I said earlier we should pop a bottle of champagne, but I think it's just a celebratory thing. But $2 million, I couldn't even imagine.
If you put that $2 million bottle of champagne and that $10 bottle of champagne in front of me, there's probably a 99% chance I could not tell which one is the $2 million one.
I'd probably accidentally drop the bottle
Yeah.
and not even be able to drink it.
Well, maybe it's so expensive because it has that gold in the wrapper itself or in the label itself. Who knows?
I don't know. So But yeah, now that can bring us into our favorite part of this episode, which is what's going on in your neighborhood. And I think I'll start off this one.
Go for it.
I'm pretty sick of the snow already.
We're what, like
Normally,
a month
it,
in?
yeah, and normally it takes me a little bit longer into winter, but we got hit with a big snowfall, like 12 to 15 inches, and then we had some bigger snow after that, and then it rained, and then it snowed more on top of that frozen rain. So now my sidewalks are still kind of like snow covered even after I shovel them. So I need like an
Yeah.
ice pick to get it all the way down. And it's like I look out the door and I feel like I'm shoveling every single day, and I'm already sick of it. So I don't know if this is going to be a crazy winter or not for us, but if this keeps up, I might have very snowy sidewalks because I might get sick of doing it.
They do make a thing called salt, right? That you can just throw on your sidewalk to get rid of that ice.
They do, but then you potentially track it into your house, and then your little, not mud, I guess we don't have a mud room, but our carpet in our back entry just gets all ruined, and then we're having to buy rugs. So it's a balancing act.
Rug or salt. I get you.
Yeah, I think I'd rather twist my ankle than ruin that rug that Jordan picked out.
That's very kind of you. She probably would thank you for that.
Yeah, I think so. Anything good in your neighborhood's going on?
Just that the holidays are in full swing, man. I know we're hosting my mother-in-law and her boyfriend this week on Christmas Eve. We're heading off to the Stack Pools, so my father's side of the family, for Christmas Day, and just really love this time of year, basically from Thanksgiving onward, just for all the different gatherings with family, specifically after the year of COVID of 2020, where we didn't have as big of gatherings, at least in my family, being able to gather again and gather safely and have, those memories back. Really looking forward to it. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. It's going to be very tiring. I will definitely say, having two young ones, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, this year's getting pretty crazy and hectic around here already. We're already making little cookies and pretzel
Nice.
treats and already planning out what our travel arrangement's going to be. It's going to be a pretty jam-packed Christmas. We'll be going from Jordan's mom's side on Christmas Eve to my parents on Christmas Day to her dad's side on day after Christmas. And it'll be really great to see everybody. It'll be a little jam-packed, but we're young enough and we can handle it, and we want to see everybody too. So that's like the big important thing, and it gives
Absolutely.
us an excuse to go and see everybody, and hopefully some of them can take some time off of work and spend some really good quality time and eat a lot of food.
Eat food, eat treats, have some good drinks.
Yeah,
It's all going to be
it's like
fun.
it's like the main meals I have a hard time kind of eating because I'm constantly snacking throughout the day.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, cookie here, oh, a
right.
little piece of candy over here.
Yeah,
Ah,
exactly.
is that a beef stick? Okay. I don't know if beef sticks are super festive, but I'll find them if they're around.
They are in your neighborhood.
Yep. After wearing some of this festive stuff for this episode, I was thinking I almost should have put on my Christmas tuxedo. I got one of those cheap ones from Target that is like green with Santa Claus on them.
You dropped the
But
ball. You dropped the ball big time there, Drew.
I really did drop the ball. Maybe I can put it in an Instagram reel or something.
There you go. Make up for it.
But I think that about wraps up the year 2021 for us. I thought it's been a great year. We've learned a lot along the way. We want to continue to learn. We're not even close to, getting this podcast where we want it to be. We want to thank everybody that's been listening this year. We hope that this recap was a good recap that will bring you into the year 2022 with ideas and goals for the next year that you can actually put into play and really see your money and your life just grow and continue to grow instead of just being in some type of rut. So we want to thank you guys again, and we will see you next year in the neighborhood.